right, let's jump into this. We're going deep on adverbs today, and specifically those comparative and superlative forms
Oh, yeah.
that we all, sometimes struggle with.
Right.
And you sent over this grammar workbook, and
Yeah.
wow, there's some really interesting stuff in here.
It's amazing how often these forms pop up,
Yeah.
in everyday speech. We don't even realize we're using them, but they really do. They add so much
Yeah.
color
Yeah, they add that extra oof.
to our communication.
Okay, so we're talking about adverbs of manner,
Yeah.
right? The words that tell us how something's done.
Exactly. Think of it like this: verbs give us the action, right?
Yeah.
But then the adverbs come in and they add that detail, that extra layer of,
Like instead of just saying walked, we could say walked nervously or walked confidently.
precisely. It just paints such a more vivid picture
It does.
for the reader or the listener. And when we want to start comparing those actions, that's where our comparative and superlative adverbs come in.
All right, let's start with the basics. The equative form.
Okay, so the equative form is all about showing that two things are equal, right? Or on the same level. It's like saying two runners finish a race at the same time.
Okay. And the grammar workbook gave us that nice little formula: as plus adverb plus as.
Right. So if we're talking about our runners there, we could say they ran as quickly as each other.
Perfect. But what if one runner was a little bit slower? That's when we use the non-equative form, right?
Exactly. We just add not to our formula.
Yeah.
Not as plus adverb plus as.
Easy peasy.
Easy.
So we could say the second runner was not as fast as the first.
Perfect. You're getting it.
Right.
Now, what if we want to compare more than two things?
Okay.
That's where things get really interesting with those comparative and superlative forms.
So comparative is for comparing two things, and then superlative is for comparing three or more.
Yes. Think of it like a race with, like a podium, Comparative is all about who gets second place, and superlative is for the gold medalist.
I like that.
Yeah. And the grammar workbook actually gave us some really fun examples of how these forms can be used, to add humor and really get specific with our descriptions.
Yeah, what was that one about the dog?
My dog doesn't bark as loudly as your neighbor's dog. That one's a real howler.
I can just imagine that poor neighbor trying to get some peace and quiet.
Exactly. I mean, it paints such a vivid picture in our minds, and that's really the power of these comparative forms.
It is.
So we dive into the actual grammar,
Yeah.
How do we form these comparative forms?
Yeah, let's do it.
Well, it's pretty straightforward. Well, we use more plus adverb plus than. So instead of just saying she sings beautifully, we could say, she sings more beautifully than anyone I've ever heard.
Ooh, I like it.
Yeah.
It's like it's more intense.
It is. It adds that extra layer of emphasis, right?
Emphasis.
And for that superlative form, which remember is that highest degree, we use the plus most plus adverb.
Okay, so I could brag and say I make the most delicious lasagna in the world.
Well, that's debatable.
Okay, maybe not the world, but you get the idea.
But you've got the grammar down perfectly.
Okay,
Yeah.
I'm feeling good about these forms.
Okay, good.
But the workbook did say that those two-syllable adverbs ending in "yay" can be a little tricky.
Oh, yes. This is where a lot of people trip up. The key is remembering that these adverbs, they don't form their comparative and superlative forms in the same way as adjectives do.
Oh, so we don't just add or yes.
Nope. We
Right.
use more and most. So, for example, we would say more quickly, not quicklier, and the most happily, not happiest.
Okay, that's a really subtle difference.
It is subtle, but it's important.
But it's important.
And it
Gotcha.
really is.
Okay, and speaking of tricky adverbs, we can't forget about those irregular ones, right?
Oh, yes.
The ones that just break all the rules.
The rebels of the adverb world.
They do their own thing.
Like, well, which becomes better and best, or badly, which becomes worse and worst.
Right.
It's just, they add a little spice to our language,
They do.
Yeah.
And it's funny how those irregular forms, they stick in your head, probably because they're so unique.
I think that's it. They force us to pay attention.
They do.
And break away from those usual patterns.
Okay, so we covered a lot, those equative, non-equative, comparative, superlative, those tricky endings, and even those irregular forms. I'm feeling pretty good about my adverb knowledge right now.
You should. But the real fun starts when we actually see these forms in action.
You're right.
Yeah.
Knowing the rules is one thing, but seeing them in real life is a whole other thing.
So I thought maybe for the next part of our deep dive,
Yeah.
we could explore some real-world examples, like in literature or even in everyday conversations.
Oh, I love that. I'm always amazed by how such small grammatical choices
Oh, me too.
can make such a huge impact.
It really is. It's like this secret code that unlocks all these deeper layers of meaning and expression.
It's so cool.
It is.
All right, let's take a quick break, and when we come back, we will be diving into the world of adverbs in action.
Sounds great.
Get ready for some serious grammar inspiration.
I'm excited. All right, so real-world examples.
I was thinking about this the other day. I was reading an article about like one of the new electric cars.
Yeah.
And instead of just saying, the car was fast, the writer said it accelerated more quickly than a cheetah chasing its prey.
Oh, wow. That's a great example. It not only gives us a concrete sense of, how fast that car is, but it creates this image in our mind.
It does.
You can practically feel that force of acceleration.
You can. Okay, so what about you? Have you come across any examples of adverbs like stealing the show in anything you've read lately?
I was rereading Pride and Prejudice the other day, and there's this line where Jane Austen describes Mr. Darcy as walking more proudly than any other man in the room.
Oh, Jane Austen, the queen of social observation.
Right. And that simple adverb, proudly, it tells us so much about Mr. Darcy, like his character, his social standing, how he wants to be perceived.
Like we get this little glimpse into his inner world.
Exactly. And sometimes these adverbs can even challenge our assumptions, Like I remember reading this news article about a politician who unexpectedly changed their stance on a key issue.
Ooh, that unexpectedly really makes you stop and think.
Right. It makes you question that narrative you might have had in your head.
It does.
And really encourages you to think a little bit more critically.
It does. This is really making me want to pay more attention to adverbs in like my own writing and just how I talk.
Oh, I think it's so worthwhile. Once you start noticing them, you realize just how much depth and nuance they add to everything.
I was talking to a friend the other day about this movie that we both saw, and she was like, the ending was so predictable.
You can just hear that disappointment, right?
Yeah.
Like that so just emphasizes it.
Well,
it's almost like you can hear the eye roll in her voice.
You totally can. It's like they amplify those emotions.
They really do. This is all reminding me of something I read a while back about the importance of active voice.
Oh, yeah, active voice.
Yeah, where the subject is actually performing the action.
Right.
And adverbs can really help to strengthen that sense of agency.
So instead of saying the ball was hit by the boy, we'd say the boy powerfully hit the ball.
Exactly. Not only does powerfully give us more detail about that action, but it puts the focus on the boy,
It does.
He's the one doing the hitting.
I like it.
Yeah, it gives him more power in that sentence.
Mm-hmm.
And that's really why understanding the nuances of adverbs can be so beneficial, especially for writers. It allows you to craft these sentences that are just so much more clear and engaging.
Okay, so we've talked about how adverbs can add detail and create imagery and reveal character and challenge assumptions and amplify those emotions and even strengthen active voice.
Yeah. It's really amazing how much these little words can do.
It really is. It's like they're the unsung heroes.
They are.
Yeah.
And I think we've only scratched the surface, really.
Yeah, there's so much more to uncover about these adverbs.
Which brings me to a thought-provoking question.
Ooh, I love a good question.
We've been talking about how adverbs can enhance our, communication.
Right.
But are there times when using too many adverbs can actually be detrimental?
Well, that's a great question. It makes me think of that saying, kill your darlings. Sometimes you got to let go of the things you love, even if it's a word.
And I think that same principle can apply to adverbs. Too many of them, they can really clutter up our writing and they weaken those verbs.
It's all about finding that balance,
Yeah,
right?
it is.
You want to use them strategically, but not overdo it.
Exactly. I think that's a good place to stop for part 2.
Okay.
We can pick this back up after a short break.
It's funny. We always think about grammar as like these strict rules.
Yeah.
But this whole conversation about adverbs,
Uh-huh.
it really shows you how much creativity there is.
There is. And strategy.
Yeah.
It's like you have this toolkit
Right.
and you have to figure out how to use them.
Exactly. You got to know the rules, but then you also got to know how to to break them or bend them or,
Right. It's all about making those choices to
Yeah.
really enhance your communication.
This whole thing about overusing adverbs
Hmm.
is making me think about how important context is.
Oh,
Like, if you're writing a children's book
yeah.
versus, like, a legal document,
Totally different.
totally, you would use adverbs so differently.
You would.
Yeah.
In a children's book, you might use like all sorts of descriptive adverbs to create those images.
Yeah.
But a legal document, it's all about precision.
Yes.
You have to be very careful.
And even within a category like a children's book, I mean, if you're writing about, like, a rambunctious puppy,
Oh, yeah.
you'd use different adverbs than if you were writing about, like, a quiet little snail. You know what I mean?
You would. Like your puppy book would be filled with words like playfully and energetically.
Exactly.
But the snail book might have words like slowly and carefully
Yes.
to evoke a totally different feeling.
Yeah, it's like the adverbs are giving the writing its own little personality.
They are. And this makes me think about just how connected language is.
Yeah.
Like one little word choice can change the whole message.
Just like a domino effect.
It is.
It's so cool. It's making me think, too, about how when I'm, like, giving a presentation,
Yeah.
I'm probably going to use adverbs a little bit differently than I would in, like, a regular conversation.
Of course. Like in a presentation, you want to emphasize those key points. You know, keep your audience engaged, but in a conversation, it's more...
You're free-flowing.
It's more natural. You're reacting in the moment.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Agree.
It's really fascinating.
It is. I think we did a good job today. We went from, like, the basic rules of adverbs
We did.
to, like, actually thinking about how to use them well.
And why we use them.
Yes.
I feel like we've gone beyond just the what and into the why and the how.
Yeah, exactly.
Which is so much more interesting.
I hope this makes everyone listening want to pay more attention to adverbs, like when they're reading and when they're writing and just when they're talking.
Because we've seen how much power they have.
We have.
They're small but mighty.
They are. Those adverbs are sneaky little things.
They are.
Keep those adverb antennae up, everybody.
Yes.
We'll see you next time.